Everyone. This is the Uncommon Connector, and we are going to be talking to William Hegwood today. He is a social impact entrepreneur, a digital resilience advocate, and a Formula One fan. We're super excited to talk to him, get to know a little bit about him, his career, and kind of how he got into that field.
There is no one else in creation like you. There's nobody like you. And what you've come to do and what you have to offer is like no other.
So, William, how are you?
Doing great. How are you?
Great, great, great. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
Sure. So I'm an educator, first consultant and strategist with 25 years of experience. Um, a lot of things, career coach at Career Catchers. We're working with the Rapid Rehousing Program. Also founder of a social impact organization called Thunderpath Consulting. I'm a Formula One fan, which is a significant part of my life when the season is on. And also I serve on a few boards, Words Beats in Life, Children's Opportunity Alliance, and Montgomery County Food Council. I have a couple of other things, but I don't want to seem exhaustive, but we'll definitely talk about it.
No problem. You're definitely a busy man. I would love to hear more about Formula One. I am not into race cars at all. I am not I know nothing about racetrack. I know nothing about Formula One, but it is definitely like an interesting sport, and I would love to hear more about it. So thank you very much. But what industry are we going to focus on today, and how long have you worked in that industry?
I mean, you can focus on, ooh, good question. We can focus on education, workforce, because it's all and together, and sustainability, which is kind of like
Okay.
the through line between a lot of what I do.
Okay, great. So, as far as being an educator, how are you a teacher? Are you a career counselor? Are you a career coach? Are you a mentor? How and what who are you educating or mentoring to? And I mean that could be anybody, of course, because you know, as a very one of my mentors told me one time, mentoring never stops. You're always continuously learning. Um, Everyone has a mentor, and so I'm interested as to where do you fit into that dynamic?
No, sure. Thank you for that. And as you're asking the questions, I'm thinking about how long should I go back? I mean, so my mom was a teacher, and so I'm familiar. I grew up in that environment. Education is important. Books, we had in our house, we had a library, right? It was small, but it was a room dedicated to books, reading. And so that's one of the things I take with me, growing up. My family involved in, advocacy, community work. My dad, just was that solid, hard worker, gave me a lot of my work ethic. So 25 years I've been in education, in different facets, whether it's early ed briefly, but I've taught all levels, even up to post-secondary school. So that really helped guide a lot of how I view the world. Besides history, of course, which is my foundation, at history at Hampton University, but how do people learn, right? How do you design systems where people can really, where you can convey the meaning and train folks effectively is really what I base a lot of, my work on. And that carries over into workforce development, STEM advocacy, sustainability, and, even on the agricultural side, promoting, you know, agricultural awareness, especially folks who are from underrepresented populations. I recently went to a black women in farming uh, uh, event last week out at Martha's Table. So it's a through line, like I said, through sustainability, and a lot of it comes from traditions that I grew up in and carrying it forward, even down to my kids. I have two boys, so I try to instill that as much as I can.
That's interesting that you said you had a library, a small library in your home when you were little. When I was younger, books were everything. I remember when we would leave to go on like a long car ride, or if we were traveling and going on a plane, my mom would always tell me the first thing that you pack is a good book. So, I always took that with me, even as an adult. I know that the format in which we read has changed. Everyone can have a Kindle or a Nook or a tablet where you can carry multiple books with you at one time and not, like four or five of these really big chunky books. But I love that you guys had a library. I would just keep books in my room. Um, so I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and there were a lot of vendors that I would come across on the train or on the subway, or on the street even that I would buy books from, and those were the books that I read. So,
I mean,
and learned to really enjoy reading.
yeah,
So
growing up in New York.
definitely go
Growing up in
ahead.
the piece about it though, and it resonates with me too because I grew up outside of New York in Westchester County, like Mount Vernon, New Rochelle
Okay.
area, and would come through Bronx. My dad worked in Manhattan, so we would go to Manhattan, Brooklyn as well. But the folks you talk about, who had the tables, I'm thinking of 125th Street,
Yes,
right?
yes, exactly. The tables.
The guys who would sell books and oils. They were a huge part of my education early on.
Oh
The
my
alternative.
God.
Yeah. So huge part.
You are speaking to my spirit right now. I mean, those those men, I don't think they realize how much of an impact they had on me. As a young woman growing up in New York City, literally that was where I bought. I know we're going off subject, but I do want to just give them praise right now because I would buy incense from them, oils, most importantly, books, mixtapes, socks. It felt like it was like a
Mhm.
one-stop shop. Like
Yeah.
downtown Fulton Street was just my haven, and that was where I felt like I could find anything that I needed. So, but those books, those
Hmm. Hmm.
men with the tables were
Hmm.
essential in my life because they sold the books that piqued my interest. They sold the books that I wanted to read. The kind of urban novels that spoke to me and mirrored, specific times in my life or things that I was going through. So I definitely love that culture, and I'm happy that you got to experience that also. So, what drew you to this career field? I know you said your mom was an educator and you guys had a library, but what grew you to this industry, and where did you study?
So what drew me to this industry was, I think, thinking back, is the familiarity with the culture of learning. Most kids of teachers, they go to school with their parents who teach, a day at school. And I just remember, in particular, the care that was taken by, a few students who pay attention to the child of the teacher, and just like that environment really seemed really welcoming to me. As well as the environment my dad was in, like construction, right? But we were kind of on our own there, but that was a great bonding influence. But like I said, to my aunts in Mount Vernon, they were a really huge part of the culture in Mount Vernon and the church. So just being around folks who serve and help without really, I mean, people are compensated, but not that wasn't the reason that they did it. Really had a huge impact on me. And so that led me to go to Hampton University, where I studied history. After quite a few trying out a few different majors, I settled on history because turns out my mom was a history teacher, but just in general, I remember this is how your influence growing up. Part of that library, Small Library, was like a catalog of like all these National Geographic magazines. And I wish to God that we kept those because it literally would be a library. Encyclopedias, her books, other books on history. And so that kind of drove me to study history at Hampton, and I loved it. They had a great staff who really taught you how to look at history from a in an objective way. And even though there were the books that you would see on the table in 125th Street, I had the was taught the critical eye of, okay, is this propaganda? Is this someone's perspective? What are their sources? So I definitely learned a foundation through Hampton, and also kind of how to look at the world in a way. The impact of the decisions made are gonna, what's the impact 20, 30 years from now, but how often, how currently people repeat history, looking for patterns in behavior, past, present, and future, hopefully predict future patterns.
Okay. Another thing our childhood shared, we had the yellow National Geographics come to the house. It was about a quarter inch thick. I love them, all the pictures from like
All the
around the
pictures.
world. They were just like opened up my world to so many things. I absolutely, and I do wish that we saved them also. The quarter-inch National Geographics that used to come. They were yellow, rectangular in shape. I do remember those. We had a ton. And we did also have a set of encyclopedias. And I do think that now, with the way that information is gathered online, we don't have encyclopedias anymore, right? In my household, having a set of encyclopedias back then in the 80s was such a big investment for my family.
Mhm.
Um, but my grandparents did it. We lived with my grandparents and they did it. So, but those were the reference materials that I went to whenever, I came home with a project to do. So definitely, I
I would go to sleep. I
definitely,
would go to sleep with the encyclopedia. That's how bad or good it was. I would be that
yeah,
kid who would be like sleeping on a book, because that was the world to me. The pictures on the National Geographic, and just the kind of world that books opened up. I just ate it up.
right, right. I love it. Could you, if you're an avid reader, you might not be able to answer this, but do you have a favorite book? Do you have a favorite author? Could you think of a book that just really resonated with you at a certain time of your life?
I mean, that's a great question. I mean, there are so many, and the caveat, not even the caveat here, is that I have less time to read now, so I'm always like
Right.
audiobooks and whatnot. I mean, I have to say historically, like there's two books that I really had an impact on me as far as history goes. One was I believe it was Chancellor Williams. It was called The Destruction of Black Civilization. And so the title is, all these titles are very jarring, but what it taught me was, okay, this is going back to ancient history, right? If most of the major rivers flow north to south, right? Kind of in general.
Mhm.
Nobody would know that, but Chancellor Williams, what he did was he taught about ancient Egypt and the difference between the Nile flows from south to north.
Up to
And
north, it
so
does.
literally just turning the map upside down, it's like, oh, like as far as like the culture coming from the south, which is really the north,
Hmm.
into the Mediterranean was how that culture developed. And as a huge ancient history fan, I just couldn't believe it. I said, well, that makes sense because they look at the pyramids and date them back, and you're like, well, how are the pyramids older in southern Egypt than northern Egypt? Well, if you flip the map upside down, you realize the water flows from south to north, and that's how the culture flows. Something like that, simple as that. And then there was another book called Black Indians. I will pick the author's name. Was interesting, a great story about the connection between the natives in southeast, what was what's now the U.S., like Florida area, the Seminoles,
Hmm.
and the
Yeah.
freed slaves in the battle, like early on the battle on how to clear out the land from the slaves who would run away and partner with the natives. And they were a formidable force. So what do? You offer the natives who wanted to leave money and send them, to Oklahoma on the great the Trail of Tears,
Right.
and you deal with the force that's down there. Great heroic folks like John Horse, right? Who fought up until even like the Civil War. So folks like that. But definitely on the historical side, those are books that I could think of.
Right. That's awesome. Great. And I know you being a native New Yorker, the Black Indian, that resonates with me in terms of, there's an Indian reservation in Long Island. And, just watching the history of that tribe and, where they were to where they've come from, to where they are today, that's also definitely a testament to, the history of New York City and, how that plays into just, the history of New York City in itself and how great it is, how diverse it is, how it's just a melting pot and you just really don't know who you're going to run into or the history that you're going to uncover.
It's so funny is one of the jobs that I had like right after college was I was a tour guide for the New York City double decker buses.
Yeah,
Um
yeah, yeah.
so I worked at Gray Line because there's two different. There's Big Apple, and they have a recorded voice, right? As a history
Hmm.
major, no, I don't want no recorded voice. The Gray Line was you kind of had to tell your own story. So I did my research and talked about everything that we saw. We did the Uptown Loop, Downtown Loop, we did the Brooklyn, and so the history of New York is like the history of America. The early Dutch who came in didn't like natives but like blacks. Then the English came in, they liked natives. It's fascinating, and even like development of Manhattan from all the way down, in the southern part, all the way up where Wall Street used to be, literally was a wall. So, I just learned so much coming back to New York and preparing for a job, kind of on the job training
Right.
at the prep and working for tips and everything. It was so much fun.
Cool, definitely. That's exciting. Sorry, I know we've gone off topic, but let's get, I feel like that all just makes you such a well-rounded, for your career with everything, all of these experiences. And that's what, we really want to drive home is that when you pick a career, you're going to pull in from all of, your personal relationships, the things that, you grew up with, how it framed you, and that makes you a well-rounded, career professional. So, while you were at Hampton or any other, professional degree that you sought out, were there any courses, certificates, anyone that advised you to seek interest into this field to better equip you for this profession?
I mean, just, dozens of people have gone through my brain. I mean, that was such a huge experience. The HBCU experience in general
Mm-hmm.
was really made such an impact. I mean, I went to kind of a really big high school where you had all different kinds of folks. So I didn't necessarily need that experience, I thought, but I visited Hampton and I saw it. I said, I love it. And so, just different history class courses. One class we spent the entire course looking at one battle, which was fascinating. I was like, how are we gonna the Battle of Berlin? That was the title of the class. So, we broke it down into, stages and who fought who and the Nazis and Hitler killing himself. That whole piece was an entire course. So it generally taught me of how much content you could put in is in history and how much it impacts individuals' lives. But I went to one of the great experiences I had was to go down to South Carolina to Beaufort, South Carolina. The Hampton University has a kind of offsite. It's called the Penn Research Center, I believe, and they connect with the Gullah culture and Penn Research. And so I participated in the Gullah Festival. First time I really known about that culture. But what I found really interesting was we stayed at people's houses. I stayed at a woman's house who actually her daughter was connected to. There's a movie called Daughters of the Dust. Somehow she was connected to that. But what I really take away from that was the Gullah language is so much like the patois we hear in the Caribbean. So when I went down to South Carolina, I'm sitting there and a gentleman was talking to me, and I knew exactly what he was saying because I understand Jamaican patois, Caribbean patois. It was literally the same thing. Now I couldn't talk it, but I was like, oh, I get it, I get it. And so that connection, the Pan-African cultural connection in South Carolina was amazing. So I thank Hampton for that. Later on, I went back, but that's after I went to Lehman College to study education, to be a teacher. We took a group of students down to Gullah, the Gullah Festival. My first time really connecting with kids from the Dominican Republic is where I taught. My student teaching was in the Bronx, and a great student teacher leader, Pat Peacock. I don't know where she is now, but she was awesome. She was like, "Hey, what do you want to do?" I said, "Let's go to South Carolina." She was like, "Sure." Took all these kids down, and that was a really impactful for them, but for me too, because
Mhm.
you get to see the amount of influence that a teacher can have on students. Taking a trip,
Right,
talking about their experience.
right.
Yeah, later on, I got a school administrative certificate, and just went to further my education as much as I could, digital learning, and also um, using instructional tools on the digital side. Kind of
Okay.
kind of rounded it out, but I'm still learning.
Okay, great. If we can go back to the Battle of Berlin, was that with the erection of the Berlin Wall?
It culminated, yes, in yep, the Berlin Wall, and just
Okay.
literally, yeah, it was guerrilla, it was like what you would see in like Fallujah, right, during the Iraq War,
Right.
like house
Right.
to house between the not only the Americans and the Germans, but also you had the Russians who were coming in. They were all trying to get to the place because the Germans had developed this technology of rockets. So they were racing to
Hmm.
get this rocket technology that they would take away and use for, the bombs and whatnot. So
Okay.
these things were going on
Right. No,
back.
I remember when the Berlin Wall fell. I believe it was 92. Um, I do remember reading the newspaper. I was a kid, but I remember reading it and being like, "Mom, the Berlin Wall fell." And somehow, some way, she had acquired a piece of the Berlin Wall. Yeah, I think an aunt of mine was stationed in Germany at the
Oh,
time,
wow.
and yeah, she got a piece of the Berlin Wall. So definitely, I get that. I was so excited to have a piece and like, look this chunk in Brooklyn, New York, it made
Sure.
me feel so worldly. Um, but I get that. And it's great that you got a chance to send some kids down to South Carolina. My family is from Latin America. And while a lot of my classmates would go visit their families down south, I would go to Latin America to go visit my family there. But I never got a chance to hone into my ancestry, that came from, South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia area. So it's great that you gave those kids that opportunity so that they're able to see, the connection between Caribbean and Americans that kind of speak the same language and how we're all so closely connected. That's awesome.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, especially as a history teacher. You make me want to feel like I have to like give kudos to my history teacher in eighth grade, Mr. Dennis DeCandidas. He was awesome. So I
Shout out
remember
to
his name to
Dennis.
this
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
Um, which has been the most valuable part of your education and your job experience?
You mean like education or job experience or like,
In anything or job or maybe education as it relates to your job experience, right? Something valuable that was education based that you said, a lot of things that we learn, we're like, oh man, I'm never going to use that. And then once we get our job, we're like, okay, I remember doing this in school and it's really, really important to my job function. I know history has a lot of that because it just
oh,
has such a wide depth.
yeah.
So because you can always keep on learning for history as time goes on. We just history evolves and we're like, wow, we didn't even, I didn't know that. But is
Mhm.
there anything that you can think of where your education just related to your job experience directly?
I mean, no, so in elementary school, like going through like those formative years, I do recall saying, I kind of said I'm never gonna learn this whenever it dealt with math, because I was not the best at math. I kind of regret that because in my real adult life, I definitely could have used some of those math skills, just feeling more confident when it comes to that. But education wise, so one thing I take away from my education experience in teaching is well, history definitely looking at things from a wider perspective, like what impact this will have. Always, even now, whenever some event happens, I'm like, damn, well, why did this happen? Like, how's it going to impact this? Um, but when it comes to planning and curriculum for a teacher, that's just the foundation. You could be like the best teacher, jokey, and really great personality. But I mean, in New York City, that's not gonna fly for a little while. You can tell some jokes, but the kids want to know, why am I here? I don't want to be here anyway. So what am I learning? And so kind of that the meat of that is the curriculum. So understanding how to design curriculum was really, really fundamental in my being a teacher, but also in my everyday life. What's the precursor? What even today I'm at an event, I'm thinking, does everybody have is using the same language, right? How do we understand each other if we're not using similar language? Especially comes if it comes to like the continuum of care and health human services, but that planning is so key because you can't always rely on your memory. You can't always rely on you having a great day to be like a sparkling teacher and all witty. Sometimes you just don't feel like doing something, but you always have the curriculum that you wrote, you sat down and planned out, okay, this is going to happen, that's going to happen. This is the homework that needs to be done. We'll go over the homework. And so that was huge. Another curriculum type of curriculum I learned that kind of changed my life was it was a backwards design, understanding by design. So basically, you start with the end goal in mind, right? You start with the theme. What do you want to learn? What do you want people to walk out of with this experience? In this case, it's kids. So how do you plan so that in the end they get that experience? Was like flip my world around. Like, how do you, okay, you know where you're gonna go. How do you get there? It's kind of like you're writing a script. Can't wait till we get to the end because I know it's gonna happen. And hopefully we all get to the end and come out with the same thing. Sometimes we don't, but it's not for poor planning. But that's really what I learned, and I carried that every day, even as a parent. I'm a father of two boys, like thinking about big picture when they were born, like, what do you want for them when they grow up? It's hard to think about these little kids as adults, but let's start working on that now, and that really had a huge impact.
How do you feel about homework? Homework has changed over the years in terms of when you and I were in school to now, right? As an educator, um, I remember coming home with homework in almost every subject, every day. Now it seems like just curriculum and school-wise, school districts have evolved to not give as much homework. What's your personal take on that?
I mean, I'm kind of old school where
Me
I
too.
don't think as a teacher, I couldn't imagine not giving homework because that means that at the end of the day, when students leave, they're not really thinking about the lesson. They're not thinking about how the lesson impacts them in their daily life. And when they come in the next day, it's almost like kind of having to reintroduce them again to the topic. You want to have something to continue to the next day, kind of like in a TV show, your little teaser for the next day. A lot of
Right.
times people don't think about homework like that, but it kind of is. You can
Right.
introduce concepts. You can kind of gauge who. That sets another way for students to get points, right? And because it can be tough as a teacher to gauge learning. You have your curriculum, you have the assessments, but what about everything else? What about, students coming to class on time, students participating, students doing the work in an environment that they feel comfortable in, and then bringing it in? It's a part of the whole continuum. So I know there's been kind of a pushback on homework. It's some are going to the extremes. There's always extremes in education, right? No homework at all, right? Which doesn't make sense. But because the opposite extreme is so much homework that the kid is like, you got your parents helping you with your homework because that's not the point. And then also depending on it's a situation at home. Ideally, I was a latchkey kid. I wasn't the best student, but I knew how important homework was. So I had time to do it. I had, mentors who helped me with homework. But some kids don't have that, you know.
Right.
So it really depends. I'm not an anti-homework person, and I don't know why my phone is ringing, but sorry, I'm not an anti-homework person. I still think there needs to be balance and
Mhm.
balance in the delivery and the continuation in the curriculum. Because
Right.
it I would also add another thing though, that for parents, it helps parents to know what's going on in their kids' class, right?
Right. Right.
I think how many times, you heard somebody say, "Oh, this is that new math." They only know that because they try to help the kids with the math, and that could be a great way to bring a parent in and discuss with the teacher, what's going on in class. So this is a tool I wouldn't want to lose as a teacher.
Right. Then this next question kind of plays on that. Like, how has the industry changed since you first started? I think that homework is kind of like a key example of that, right? You know, like we said, when we were kids, we'd have homework in every subject. Now I know my kids, they don't come home with anything. If I want them to do something, I have to assign it to them, or I send them to our family library. Are there any other instances of that dynamic where the industry has just changed from when you first started?
Definitely education and how much self-learning is going on. University of YouTube. You'd just be surprised on how even my 17-year-old, he'll watch a couple of YouTube videos. He thinks he's an expert. He's more of an expert than he was before he started watching it. But the basic information a lot of time is conveyed through video, and that's really changed. And so it doesn't make the teacher is less of the like source of information. Like I've never been one of those teachers who've been like, I'm the source of information. I like to teach on how they could find the sources and be critical thinkers. That's always the best because suppose you're not there one day. They're like, what are we gonna do? But now as young folks have so much access to so much information. It's almost too much for them to filter. So that's huge. I think also the how important it is for parents to be involved in the education system, in the education of their child. Whereas, and maybe this has always been the case. My mom was a teacher, so there was an aspect of that that was always part of my life. But I don't really remember them coming to parent-teacher conference night unless I did something bad, or but there were other places that I could learn in my community. My aunts were great and whatnot. But I think um, I'll be not contradicting myself that even more so parents need to be involved because there's so much information out there and the teachers need so much help. I needed help, as a teacher, when parents came in, I loved it. I could communicate with a parent, what's for homework, I let them know. It just really more how it needs to be more of a community effort between parent, teacher, and school. I would say that.
Yeah. You mentioned your aunts a lot, and how they really framed and helped in your family. My aunts were I now, as an adult, realize how great my aunts were to me. My mom has five sisters, and all of them have been so influential in my life. So I can definitely see, as you're speaking, I can almost see and articulate and feel in my heart and my spirit how your aunts were so, pivotal in your upbringing because I had that same relationship with my aunts as well.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, what are some skills that you think are vital for this career field?
Um, let's see, skills. So the ability to, to be open to learn, as first of all, starting off that you're not necessarily always going to be the expert. Um, thinking about empathy, um, um, is a great skill. Being empathic, empathetic, being able to facilitate multiple conversations, right? Pull from different sources, um, being open to, well, I learned this kind of recently is I wish I learned this early on as a teacher. I used to be so the term sarcasm, Shakespeare's a quote, sarcasm is the defense of the weak, right? So I remember reading that, I was like, ah, what does he know? I'm sarcastic. And kind of being from New York, culturally, sarcasm is a part of, what people do, right? So I remember, I
Right.
never forget a student I had that was honestly trying to understand what I was talking about, and they said something to me that made me say, well, my sarcasm is funny to me, but if especially in an environment with students and when I'm trying to convey meaning, if they don't understand what I'm saying because how I'm saying it, whether it's like smart or fun, it really doesn't matter. You know, how funny I think I am, I'm not communicating it. And for a student like this who really wanted to learn, like another time it flipped my world around. So I started to become more um, not sarcastic. So it's like, under, asking questions for understanding, right? You know, I know it may seem like you really should know what I'm talking about. And at a point earlier in my life, I might have made a little joke, right? Not calling somebody that's rude, but making a little joke. But let me just assume you don't know. Let me try and explain it again. Let me ask you for questions and understanding. So kind of assuming that positive intent is something that really, really helped further as far as help me grow, as far as being able to understand people's perspective, and communicate and connect with more people. And so what that does in workforce, what that does is allows you to talk to people in different sectors, talk to employers, potential employees, people in government, right? Because we're all here to learn. I'm assuming we're all here to help folks, right? Whoa, what was me? And then
Right.
if you're not, you know, let me ask you a question one more time, just to assess whether you're really not here to help folks, and then I could be on my merry way and speak with the folks who are really trying to help. And so that empathy, and being able to pull from different sources definitely has helped me.
Right. So what would you say has been your biggest success factor? Because that's a big one, what you just talked about in terms of being able to ask a question in a way to get the answer that you're looking for, especially when folks don't understand. Um, get the true misunderstanding of what they're not understanding, right? That was kind of a weird way to say that, but asking the right question to understand what they're not understanding. Because I think that is definitely a skill set to be able to ask those key questions or have enough patience to dig into what someone isn't understanding.
Mhm. Mhm.
But is that the vital skill for teaching as a career field?
I think, yeah, if I can go back in time, if I could go back and sprinkle magic dust in
Mhm.
your preparation curriculum. You planning is a fundamental, it's a fundamental skill in teaching. If you don't have plan, if you don't know about curriculum, you're kind of winging it. So you never want to wing it. But that understanding that, you don't know everything and to assume that you do, you shoot yourself in the foot. You're not really presenting, you're not really an objective, participant in this, right? You definitely could, then at some point you can hop in and hop out. Teaching is fun because you can assume certain personalities if you want and act certain things out, but you always are gonna be able to pull yourself back and let people come to their own determinations. You don't want to say that you should learn this, right? But I would say, understanding, planning, but that kind of, I want to call it just taking taking a beat, You want to jump to a conclusion, but let me stop. And that, being able to stop jumping to conclusion or just waiting a beat means you could wait forever. I mean, you could then really ask the questions you need to ask because you're not reacting, right? Of some
Right.
emotional misunderstanding you may have.
Right.
You know, let me understand, let me ask questions, and and it has to be authentic. And I've gotten out of many situations, contentious situations by just, not playing dumb, but like, hey, I assume this, but let me ask you, is that really how you feel? And it's not in a sarcastic way. It's me asking them, and you'd be surprised what people say, and then that opens up other conversations, because you're open to ask them, they're open to say, okay, well, I see where you're coming from. If I'm going to say, hey, and they're always asking for permission too, which is always great. You can get a lot done with asking for permission. Can I share my opinion, right? I've heard you. Now, can I tell you how I feel about this? People are open. And I think that has been, and even that came later in my life, because I had, the teaching experience and the great experience with my family growing up, but that ability just to ask questions and honestly be open just kind of push me forward to be just I could literally probably go anywhere and just get to know folks because I'm curious, really honestly
Right.
curious.
Right. How do you maintain a work-life balance wearing so many different hats? And what advice would you offer someone just starting out?
It's a good question. There's some stuff I'm working on. Work-life balance, people say different things. If you're doing what you love, there's no such thing as a work-life balance. I mean, for me, work-life balance is being able to um, spend time with your loved ones, right? Um, in this case, it's my family, my kids, my loved ones, to be able to be there for them, which is really I'm not going to say most people feel that way, but a lot of work-life balance is separating the money making, right? The things that you have to do, the grind, right? From feeling grounded, the grind versus feeling grounded. Sometimes they mix, but I think health wise, when the work life balance, how it really comes into play, especially with Black men, honestly, is a lot of times, men in general, let me just say that, don't necessarily check on their health. And as say this, I'm speaking into power. I have to make certain appointments, but you know, um, in taking the balance, in stopping for a second and thinking about your health, or even connecting with your family will then say, "Hey, have you made that appointment? Right? How you doing?" That's a way of getting centered. But a lot of times, folks are taught to just keep grinding, because it's all about what you could do, how much money you can make, and whatnot. And then the opposite of that thinking as well, how can I enjoy my family? How can I really, really make an impact in another way besides just that, listening to folks,
Right.
being there for folks when they need you.
Right. Where do you see this industry going in the future?
I mean, so workforce, education, whew, it's, I have no idea. I mean, I know, like, I could say that the technology has a way of really shaping the industry, especially now. Artificial intelligence, people talk about it being a game changer. It really is. And I feel let's have a 17-year-old and a 25-year-old, right? They're kind of on the cusp of this using AI in school. But I feel like the really younger generation growing up in education is teachers are going to have a tough time. The parents will as well because there's so much at hand. There's so much of the things that make us human, right? For instance,
Mhm.
reading, language, written language, right? For the first time, there is a tool that could write for you. You know, Whatever language you speak or write, that's something that's uniquely human. Um, and in this case, something artificial is writing scripts, creating programs, doing coding, writing papers for us. And so kind of what do we do? How does that fundamentally changes how we make an impact? So I don't know. I just know that the critical thinking skills we have that we were taught on, I taught, learning history, pulling from different sources, right? You don't just go based on one person's opinion, right? You ask other folks, what do you think? think for yourself, weigh the options that will never leave us. So more of an emphasis on that is going to be important. Um, However, the society we live in, which is driven by, profit, it's like almost like a
Right.
counterbalance. It's really going to be difficult to navigate. I hope for the best, but definitely like to uh, prepare or let folks I know, hey, this is how you can prepare, do your research, learn about AI as much as you can, how to prompt and how to use it in a positive way, and you know, put on your raincoats, get ready for the storm because it's
Right.
gonna be interesting.
Right. Adjacent to that, how do you feel about cell phones in school, cell phones in the classroom? That was a question that Functional Training Zone put out there on our social media a couple weeks back. And as you being an educator and kind of seeing the transition of, books, papers, and pens to the technology that is zooming through classrooms today, you mentioned AI in terms of, where the career field is going. How do you feel about cell phones in the classroom and benefit, pros and cons to that?
Yeah, I don't honestly. I've seen it. Teachers always try to adapt, you know. I do remember, I know there's still even some curriculum that asks students to take out their phones, and there's a couple of apps like Kajabi is one way to do like um, games on the phone, which is cool. Trying to integrate the technology. I would have to say because of AI, because of the impact and how much it could really drive so much as far as content goes, just the amount of content that could be pushed out with artificial intelligence when it comes to marketing and even propaganda. I would say that the schools that are limiting cell phone use, even up to like high school, really, really no cell phones in school, I think that's not a bad policy.
Yeah.
Elementary school, middle school, even because of the unless the social media companies change and they stop targeting younger people with the ads and whatnot, I think it would really help parents if that part was just put away for a little while.
Right,
Um,
right.
I'm not a big, and I sound like a Luddite or fuddy-duddy, but having a cell phone I'm thinking about how much of a distraction it would be for me as a student in
Mhm.
elementary school or hard as a teacher as far as, like attention span. Introducing it once students really develop the paper and pen, I'm okay with that. Even if it's on one of those little, not even an iPad, what are those, the little, it looks like handwritten paper. Even if you're using that, or what's wrong with the paper and a pencil to get those fundamental skills, critical thinking skills, because ultimately the technology may not always be there. What if I have to
Mhm.
write down some thoughts and I don't have a computer? What do I do then? And so kind of building the fundamentals in there early on and then introducing technology, I think we'll be better off.
Right. I mean, obviously, you and I come from the generation of, spiral notebook for every subject and, papers and pens and, teachers reading our work and putting the big, big red X's through stuff and, kind of going through our work that way. Spelling was big, punctuation was big, sentence structure was big, verb usage, all of that. So I know that cell phones are helpful for a lot of those aspects, but it seems in certain forums that students are just kind of losing those skills. So I can tend to agree with you. There's a safety aspect to students having their cell phones at school, obviously, with the way the world is today. You coming from New York City, me, myself also, we dealt with safety in schools for different reasons. But now there are other things that are just
Mhm.
happening in schools that it almost makes it essential for students to have cell phones. But the functions of just actually learning sentence structure, punctuation, basic math skills. Um, it seems that they are wavering more and more because we are relying so much on our cell phones to do those functions for us. So thanks for that.
Yeah.
Um, are you a member of any professional organizations or associations? I know that you mentioned that earlier in the conversation, that you wear a lot of hats and you carry a lot of initials behind your name.
I'm involved in a lot of things. Yeah. Yeah. And that is a choice. You know, but
Mhm.
it's definitely stimulating. I can't say I don't get anything out of it. But I do find that besides working, as a career coach with career catchers, um, you know, participating on nonprofit boards is something that I started a few years ago, and definitely enjoy it, because it's really interesting how nonprofit organizations are raising money, but also like the goals and the mission of what they're trying to do is really amazing to me. It's just as difficult as starting a business. It's a business. Nonprofits are businesses, especially when they're as large as some of the organizations that you see out there. Um, um, a couple in particular, one of them is Words Beats in Life, which is a part of the hip hop community. They've been around. It'll be 25 years next year. Started in DMV, and so what I recall from that, I'm a parent member, which I don't know if that's a category, but I am that. But my oldest son, when we first moved down from New York, um, God bless him, he was at so many different schools, because he was a really bright kid. And so it was like, no school was good enough. They didn't want to move him, advance him beyond, a year, which I totally get, but schools really pushed back against that. We were like, fine, well, he'll go to Catholic school, right? And so when we moved down to DC, we kind of decided, okay, let's put him on a track that we both were on as young people. And DC culture was really different. So one of the things that I like is that organization really kind of opened their arms when it came to helping him, like introducing him to DC culture as well as me too. I remember DJ RB. I brought my oldest son down there, and the DJ was like, "What's up, bro? What's up, bro?" And then part, that led to other parts of DC culture opening up, which was awesome. So then when years later, they said, "Hey, we have a board opening." I said, I'm a fan, already. I know your
Mhm.
work. By then, I think my son had graduated, or he was in Morehouse, so doing his thing. And so I said, how can I help? So I'm definitely, promoting, a lot of what they do with education, because that resonates with me, and culture too. A huge part of me growing up is what I know about hip hop and how hip hop taught me. KRS-One, like all the folks,
Yeah, no, KRS-One taught me too. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. My first rap concert I remember was Mount Vernon High School. It was Biz Markie, Rob Bass. You're just going back in the day. And I remember
Mm.
at the end, I think Big Daddy Kane was on there. And I remember it was the first time it was high school. I was like, damn, this is. I remember when one of my cousins was up in the stands. I was like, I'm really here because my older cousin was there. Just hip hop had a huge impact on my life. So that carries over into nonprofit work. Also, one of the other organizations is Children's Opportunity Alliance, Montgomery
Okay.
County, promoting early care, the affordability of early care, and the paying early care workers enough,
Hmm.
because of the important work that they do. Kind of thinking about how, I taught in elementary, middle, high school, and beyond, but really the foundation is in those first 5 years.
Yeah.
What set me right, what set my kids right, going back to my aunts, was the early care. Now they didn't go to daycare because we had the luxury of family. and they
Mhm.
all taught in different ways. We just benefit from that so much. At the same time, though, um, everybody doesn't have that.
No,
So coming to everybody doesn't have that, but a lot of the roads lead to public school. So once preparing young folks for public school or whatever school they go to, the foundation is really in those early years. So with Children's Opportunity Alliance, talking about the importance of early care, what it takes, why, there's some discrepancies, and really bringing that to light is something that I enjoy talking about and
right,
promoting. Yeah.
right. I
Don't
I
forget Formula
love
One.
that. Yeah, no, I love that you mentioned that hip hop raised you because hip hop raised me too. Like, KRS-One, Wu-Tang Clan, all of them. Big Daddy Kane. I remember I went to his signing at the Wiz downtown Brooklyn. So like
Wow. Okay.
yeah, I had his autograph. Like I loved it. I came home and my mom was like, "Where were you today?" Like, yeah, I used to take the train to Tower Records in Manhattan whenever there was an artist there that was, signing CDs. And I loved it. Like definitely hip hop raised me. So
Yeah.
um
It's a huge
also
part.
just the culture. What?
Oh, go ahead, go ahead.
Also just the culture in, New York City schools. I had a teacher, Miss Lee, and she was of Asian descent, and she turned our classroom into like a actual Chinese classroom, right? So for the Chinese New Year, we all had to wear red. She made like a big paper dragon, and we all went like around the school to
Mm.
like different classrooms that had different like baskets of fruit for us, or like we would drop off gifts to other classrooms underneath this paper dragon. And my husband to this day, he's like, "How are you so good using chopsticks?" Because she had the hugest bucket of chopsticks on her desk. And if any of us forgot a fork for lunch, that's what she would give us to use.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so like it was muscle memory, something I learned in third grade, and thanks to Miss Lee, I am like so good with it. You know what I mean? I definitely loved my New York City education because it brought just so much culture. Every teacher came from a different ethnic background. Miss Tay was Filipino. That was when I was first introduced to lumpia.
Mm.
Um, yeah, Miss Lee was a Chinese. She spoke Mandarin. She was
Yeah.
just like the greatest teacher ever. Mr. Jerome was my math teacher. He was West Indian. Like it hit home for me because, part of my family has West Indian and I loved it. So New York, growing up in New York City definitely frames you. Like hip hop raises you, the streets teach you, and I love that you just pulled from all those experiences to make yourself and your sons well-rounded to, give them what they needed now, um,
I, I,
now
I,
as young men.
I wanted
What
to,
are some long-term career goals that you have, or long-term career opportunities within this industry?
long term, is to pretty much. Okay, this may sound strange. The type of environment that I grew up in, uh, culture rich, mentor rich, just kind of to have, this may sound corny, but have that for everyone, right? To provide be able to present an alternative to what folks think is the corporate culture. You can kind of have both. You could have you know you know, have both your feet in one in your cultural life and one also in kind of the regular American life. And not necessarily to sound, cliche, but it's possible. I mean, and specifically though, young folks as far as like um, all young kids. I especially think, like you said, growing up hip hop, kids like me, right, who boys, black boys especially, who are, you know, not necessarily um, figured it out yet. There's a book
Mhm.
called by Jawanza Kunjufu. It's called "Be Popular or Smart." And what it does is it talks about how by the fourth grade, you can kind of determine whether it's not determine, but it's a high likelihood the child will drop out of school if they're not really interested in school by fourth grade, Black boys in particular. It talks about the influence that family teachers have, and so I always thought about that because then what happens is as they go through school they have varied interests, but a lot of times the popular culture says that this young Black boy has to like sports or this or that, right? And they don't really have to, right? And so um, that's really kind of what I'm speaking to. There are so many alternatives, so many different ways you can go as long as you're kind of have your feet planted in, the culture and the positive affirmations of that culture. You could pretty much do anything. So that's what I try to convey with my kids, but then also everybody I meet, just
Right,
being inquisitive about what they're doing and really asking them the key questions.
right. What advice would you give yourself 15 years ago?
15 years ago, I would definitely introduce the assuming positive intent as early as possible.
Yeah.
Just stop for, hey, throw the sarcasm out the window. It doesn't help. Just listen, see how you can help. And you would be amazed at how far you could go.
Right. Why are platforms like functional training zones so important to young adults?
So the platform is important because it gives the level of seriousness to and as far as career paths go, to be able to understand what folks do, listening to someone who is already gone through a career path, right? What's the advice they give? Um,
Right.
Understanding, how many different kinds of careers people may have, what brought
Hmm.
them to this particular point. They could have really thought they liked something, but then pivoted and really increase their information, increase the impact they're having. So that journey is so very important. Hearing how folks are traveling that journey because a lot of that resonates with young folks and they see themselves. Because I remember seeing folks, who are on particular journeys. I said that kind of reminds me of me. I'm going to pay attention to that person.
Hmm.
Mentors you meet in real life as well. I always think back to those folks. And they're presented on platforms like Functional Training Zone.
Thank you. Thank you. And I know how to connect with you, but how can our listeners connect with you and kind of ask any questions, inquire more about what you're doing?
Sure. Well, I started, it's called Thunder Path Consulting. It's a website. That's really the best way to get in touch. Hopefully I'll just share it with you as well. But that's the start. I mean, I work with a couple of organizations, so just besides that, look out for there's a thing called the DMV Fest coming up. July 26th, I believe. It's second year it's happening. Words Beats and Life puts it on, and it's performers from around the DMV out on the National Mall. That should be really awesome. Come out, be different nonprofit organizations as well. Um, but then also looking at kind of tying it into my love of Formula One. We didn't even talk about that.
We
There's an
didn't. We didn't.
yeah,
You know what? We got so wrapped up in both of us being from New York. We forgot about that. Let's rewind a little bit. Okay. Give it to me. Formula. I know nothing about that. I can't relate.
it's okay because nobody really is into it. So as a kid, I'm growing up, I'm watching TV. I loved auto racing, and what I found was at that time, even the NASCAR really didn't appeal to me, although it was racing. There I saw like Confederate flags. I just really didn't understand that. What I did like with Formula One whether you had racers from Brazil, from Argentina, from different places around the world. They had a race in South Africa, right? So it was very international, and I kind of was that type of thinker. So although we didn't go to a Formula One race, my dad used to drive us up to Watkins Glen, which is way up, way up upstate New York to go to races. I was able to meet Willie T. Ribbs, who was like one of the few black drivers. got his autograph. We went to Lime Rock, which is a racetrack in Connecticut. My mom, she really liked it when she got to meet Paul Newman because he was into racing and he's an actor, but she loved Paul Newman. So that's the only reason she went. But just that interest that my dad kind of supported kind of kept me interested in Formula One racing and the really great drivers in the 80s, 90s. And then what happened as throughout time, within the last decade, there have been a lot of diversity uh, um, um, in Formula One, which is really awesome to see. And so I kind of got back into it and really became interested in the diversity as far as diverse folks, but also women. Seeing that is always really awesome because it allows folks to be in that situation, in that high tense environment where they have to perform, and it really doesn't matter what you look like, gender. If you can perform, you can perform. So I recently went to a work with an organization called STEM Racing, which tries to get young people involved in Formula One through different projects that they do. They have a national finals. The last one was in North Carolina. They ultimately go to a world final, which I think this year is in Singapore, I want to say. But I'm just starting to get involved with them, and I just love the diversity of it and the competition. You know.
Right. No, that's awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that interest.
The most valuable commodity I know of is information. Wouldn't you agree?
I don't even know what that means.
No one knows what it means, but it's provocative.
No, it's not. It
Gets the people going. No!
It's your boy JR dropping them beats.